Hello, we're here in Las Vegas in the historic Fifth Street School Gallery. What you're seeing here is an exhibition that has been created over 2 or 3 years. The work in the room represents 32 artists from around the world. They all use different mediums. They work in different ways. And what we've seen is the beginning of the questioning of how artificial intelligence actually fits into the art world or the world of creativity. Some of the work on display here is completely AI generated. Some of it is influenced by AI, and some of it uses generative AI.
There's a lot of work that you see online, and what they don't acknowledge is that it's been generated using AI. We had a conversation recently with one of the creative practitioners within our exhibition, and she mentioned, which was very, very interesting, that there was a piece of work that she found that the AI generated for her. She thought, that looks really interesting. And because of due diligence, she checked, only to discover that it was actually a direct copy of another person's work. Now, imagine the uproar had that person said, this is what I've produced, not said it was AI generated, and potentially was infringing on someone else's work 100%. Now, that is one of the dangers of using AI in creativity. We're not acknowledging or accepting that what it is actually doing is pooling in information and work generated by others. And that is something that we have to be responsible for and acknowledge. By not acknowledging it, we are allowing AI to rework and rewrite what we've been doing for generations, which is making creativity from the heart.
It might seem exciting, fun to use AI tools for artistic work, but there are two things that artists need to be aware of. Firstly, a question. How would you like it for big tech companies to profit off of your work by training their AI tools without compensating you and many other artists who go through the same process? Secondly, and acknowledging that regulations are ever-changing and region-specific, there have already been instances where artists using generative AI tools in their work have been unable to claim the intellectual property of their own work. So when using AI tools in art, be ready to learn the legalities about protecting your intellectual property.
Using AI assistively is a huge thing, right? Like, you don't want to take yourself out of the equation, right? Like, you are still the creator, and if you want to own these things, you still have to have provable, in the United States at least, our copyright laws, you have to have provable human authorship, right? So if you're just letting the AI autonomously do everything from a simple, quick prompt, like, you're not actually the creator. So, being the artist requires you to interact with the tools and the medium and express yourself, not just let the machine do all the expressing.
The people who are vulnerable, children, people who are, older, that some of our parents are, like in social media, constantly posting things, and you're like, that's not real, mom. That's, like, that's AI, dad, that, and even sometimes me, that there's, things are popping up and you think it's real, but actually it's not, because it's so realistic. And so I think what it's doing is kind of sowing seeds of doubt for, for the people who are kind of aware of what's going on, of people saying, like, what's happening with my son? Like, is this real? Is it AI? And then the people who really are kind of oblivious, that they're starting to think that things are real, that are not.
I would say that at the moment, perhaps it's enhancing our reality by adding up those highly sophisticated tools. What I have problem with is calling AI like one united intelligence of sorts, whereas from the scientific point of view and from the perspective of those who are developing AI, almost everyone would agree that those programs are like, the artificial intelligence is nothing else but many programs communicating with each other. So the power of those tools is communication between those programs, those different intelligences. I would call it like a collective intelligence rather than one united intelligence. We don't have it as yet. Whether it's enhancing our reality or not, as I said, in many ways it is enhancing our reality because we are already using AI for very good purposes. We can do some predictions, like weather predictions, make some predictions. We could use it for medical purposes, and it is being used on everyday basis.
I went to an AI art exhibition with my son, who at the time I think was 5. And it was Rafik Anadol, Echoes of the Earth, a living archive. And it was played at the Serpentine in Hyde Park. What the artist had done was take an AI to go through like the Smithsonian and the Natural History Museum archives and really scrape all of this information about nature. And then the exhibition was the AI kind of taking it, kind of representing certain animals, but then starting to evolve the animals and kind of invent new animals that were not real, but they looked extremely real. And I was there with my son, and I realized he didn't have a firm grasp yet of what reality was. And he didn't have the same anchoring that I had. And he also, I mean, luckily I was there and I sat him down right away and I was like, right, let's talk about what you're seeing. Let's talk about what's going on. But I was in this, exhibition with, 100 other kids who didn't have adults doing that. They didn't have adults sitting down and going, okay, this is exactly what's happening right now. I'm going to explain this to you. And even, I mean, my son was young enough that even when I was explaining it to him, he didn't quite, he couldn't grasp really exactly what was happening. But he kind of got the gist of it.
AI generates things based off of data sets. And if data sets are skewed or non-representational of the nature or environments or, cultures, all the different things, like that will start to skew how people see things, especially as there's more and more content generated from AI. So making sure that sets are not only ethical but inclusive will absolutely have a huge effect on how people perceive nature and just the world at large around them. I mean, thinking about like if only ecosystems, and when we say nature, I'm going to say specifically like let's talk about a forest, right? A forest in where I live in region of the United States is different than a forest in India or in Japan, or so. I know early on some of these, like if you typed in a beautiful woman, like almost always a white person, right? Like these are problems and these are things that we need to address and make sure that we're not skewing like, oh, well, beauty means you have white skin and you have hair and you look this way. Like we don't want that. That's not humanity.
AI has I'd say it's revolutionized the way we are able to interact with the physical world, and our relationship with nature has been radically shifted by the use of AI. One example would be the use of generative AI to depict all sorts of things in nature. Um, we know that especially among young people and children who are just beginning to understand and appreciate nature and the world around them, uh, AI is an instructive tool, and um, a lot of young people would prefer the use of AI than your standard camera, because they can use all sorts of prompts to connect different different aspects of nature in ways that weren't previously imagined. And I think that is quite incredible. And but at the same time, I'm also wary of deferring too much agency to artificial intelligence. I think there are many ways in which AI is enhancing our experience of reality um, by allowing us to um, reimagine different scenarios, like I don't know, 50 Cent singing his famous tunes uh, in the style of the 50s music. Um, just thinking, you know, quite creatively about how we combine different aspects of the creative process of making art. Um, but in some ways, it also reduces our understanding of reality because um, it inherits a lot of the biases that exist in the human brain. And so, if we're not careful, then those biases could influence the outcome of um, of the um, of the technology and the products that these technologies create.
Even now, years after him seeing that exhibition, my son still queries to me, is this real or is this AI? And so immediately after we went to the exhibition, I did notice when we were on the street, he would see like an advertisement, anything printed, and he would be like, is that AI? Is that real or is that AI? And I was like, oh my gosh. All of a sudden, without my permission, like I took my son into this art exhibition, and now I'm having to spend so much time explaining to him what is real. That was very unexpected. But even now, just a few weeks ago, so he's 7 now, he saw a picture of a puffin, which is a kind of an unusual bird. And he said to me, that's definitely AI. That's not real. And I was like, oh, honey, that is real. That is not AI, that's real. And so then every time it happens, I feel like, okay, right, let's get on YouTube, show him pictures of puffins, get on National Geographic, help him establish what is real. And so I think that AI, when it's generating, visually, AI has a huge impact on people's ability to understand reality, especially if they are still building up that understanding of what reality is.
Absolutely not. AI tools scour enormous amounts of data that they are trained on to generate media that correlates with the prompts that users input. So, if I want to create an image of Pope Francis in a Balenciaga jacket, I can go to an AI image generator, type just that, Pope Francis in a Balenciaga jacket. What the tool roughly does is identify relevant concepts. So Christianity, cathedrals, Balenciaga would have to do with expensive tastes, fashion, and so on. And then these features, which are already mapped somewhat secretly in the tool's training process, allow the machine to generate a mishmash of pixels that together capture those features. I have not heard of any bit of creativity in that process.
I think creativity is a human characteristic. It's a thing that we do as a species, and maybe some other species do it that I'm not aware of. But that I think creativity in itself is human, and I think the AI can mimic creativity through learning from in a machine way through all of our input. But I think the creativity comes from human beings. It comes from our thoughts. It comes from our ideas. It comes from us asking the machine for things that we thought about and then curating and cultivating those things, however we do that post whatever generations. I've made entire pieces of art from what I would consider to be like stock images I generated generation tool, and then 9 hours of photo collaging and photo bashing and drawing on top of and like making really cool things. But that creativity came from me, not from the machine.
There's a lot of fear and anxiety and worry over AI. And actually, AI is just a tool. AI just does what it's told to do. So what we really need to be zeroing in on are business models. What is the business model of this AI? Is this AI that has been designed to go into a creative market and scrape out everything it can to compete with the creators? Well, that business model is mining. You know, that's the same business model as the people who go in and strip mine minerals. You know, that it's not something that's putting anything back. It's going in and taking things, but those are finite resources. And I think a lot of AI companies are already seeing this, where they went in and they scraped everything out, and then they were, what's the word? That they're generating new content, and it's like AI generated content so they can feed their AI because they've already scraped everything out. So that's strip mining, and what you're going to be left with are what's the same thing as what strip mines are left with, which is big wastelands of, you know, resources that were, you know, once quite beautiful. And it versus farming. So farming is, I think that the farming business model for AI is happening a lot in scientific discovery. People now have more to study. They have more products to deliver. You know, that there's, that wasn't really an instance where they were going in and scraping up human talent. They were going in and discovering new things for humans to know about that then the humans can use to, you know, generate loads of things. So I think AI is just a tool. And I think we have to revisit business and business models and the idea of regenerative business practices. Because I know we use things like sustainability and regenerative, and it goes into quite a kind of a green space and saving nature, but actually the fundamental philosophies of regeneration and sustainability are very applicable to AI, because AI basically consumes, you know, to create. And so if you put it in a situation where it's just going to consume and not replace anything, it's going to run out, you know, and it's not sustainable. Versus if you put it in a situation where it's creating things that regenerate, you know, new things for it to then consume, that's regenerative.
Being inspired and saying, I've looked at all these pieces of work and I'm inspired by it is very, very different, because this is your actual brain and your thought process generating that. With students, you know, they produce sketchbooks. My students used to produce sketchbooks of ideas, and they clearly stated, and you should do, that it's been inspired by visits, by conversations, but you're acknowledging that. And you say, I've been inspired by what's around me. AI generates that inspiration for you by keystrokes, and that is very, very different. You're asking a machine to, based on a subject, to find works that you say, okay, I'm inspired by that. It's a very, very different approach.
It's like writing an essay without a bibliography. You know, you wouldn't be able to submit your essay, because it's like, okay, where did you get all of that? That's part of the journey that is giving you that new inspiration, that new piece of work. And I think it's important, as Julia said, to validate that experience. But if it happens to be that you've looked at some generative pieces, or at the long time ago, the New Scientist exhibition at Excel in London, there was an artist who was generating, you know, using a physical paintbrush and an algorithm to create pieces. I thought that was amazing, and that sent me on a whole nother journey. But the way I would talk about that in my work is to completely validate what I'd seen. So that is part of it, passing that off, which I think is again what Julie was referring to there, is where the damage is done.
What is artistic process, we have to ask? Yes, in the artistic process of being inspired, yes, of creating something original, something that you come up with and you don't know where does it come from. Yes, it's just like with music, you don't know where this music comes from. With the painting, you don't really understand why you see things the way you see it. So you're creating those images. So how can AI be used like everything else? You look at the stone and you think, oh my goodness, I don't know why I think I could use the stone as an inspiration. Perhaps that's the answer. Perhaps. It could be used this way, but this is just one way of looking at it. People could ask any of the available tools like ChatGPT or any other tool, or Copilot or some other image generators to generate something like text to image. Yes, so you provide some piece of information and AI is generating an image for you, and then you look at it and you provide some new version, some version of the same image, but digested by your own brain and just filtered for your own imagination and sensitivity. So that could be one of the possible usages, but it could be also used as a filter. Like I saw images, my friend actually, she's an artist, visual artist, and she has been using AI to generate images of the night sky, of planets, and they were quite amazing. So there is another, when you're an artist, I believe that your brain works in a certain undefined way, and you can use certain tools, including AI, in some idiosyncratic ways.
A LoRa model is essentially, it's a low rank adaptation model, and it's basically goes on top of like another larger model, right? Like your stable diffusion models and those sort of things. But it's a specific data set that's curated as an individual for this specific purpose. So in my case, I only put in pictures of my dad's art. I could make a LoRa model that generates images of the forest and use it just from images I took of the forest. This is important to me because I think this is a step in the right direction of more ethical AI generation, right? So when you're in control of the intellectual property of everything that goes into the data set, it puts you in a better place, I feel like, in a more ethical place for using this art, because as we all know, the data sets that were created from these larger data sets, these things that built stable diffusion, all the first generations of image generation models, there was no consent or compensation or credit given to the creators of all of that content, and I don't feel like that's ethically okay. So we're still working that out on the legal side of things in the whole world, but yeah, that needs to change moving forward. And actually, I created a LoRa model of just my late father's artwork, who's been deceased since 2016, and I was able to take a bunch of his work, put it into this LoRa model, train it with my language, which I also use an LLM to do, which I could get into more if you like. But now I can ask this thing to make new art from my father, and it literally works. Like the first piece that came out of there that looked like my dad's work made me cry, and it was so beautiful and healing and weird and like science fiction-y, like all at the same time. And I'm just fascinated by all of it.
Responsible AI matters to me the same way justice matters to me. AI systems, by default, perpetuate the same injustices we find in the social world. By default, AI tools are trained on biased data, that is, data that are sexist, racist, ableist, and so on. By default, AI is developed by the rich entirely for profit making. Responsible AI stands against all of this. It's a global dialogue for innovations that respond to real social needs, for intentional social consequences, and for the protection and promotion of the environment.
Responsible AI matters to me greatly, hugely. The greatest danger when it comes to AI is manipulation and misinformation. I think that we would all agree that a huge part of human existence is communication. Without communication, human beings are not who we are. We need to communicate, we need to tell stories, we need to build our environments on information. So what we leave behind is what we create and what we build on information left to us by previous generations, by scientists, by our family members who are passing some information to us. So information is of huge value. And when it comes to AI, we all know that AI is being fed information every single moment. The other thing is that we human beings are sometimes, we can be dangerous to ourselves. Yes, each and single one of us has certain amount of self-awareness, self-love, self-esteem, but sometimes all of that what we have is not enough. And when we are in moments of difficulties and we are most vulnerable and we start to communicate with artificial intelligences or AI through large language models, this is the moment when we can be easily manipulated. We can become addicted. So not because someone is making us addicted to something, but because we have this tendency as human beings, we are not perfect. Let me just veer into the direction of women and AI. So sexualization of women image is far greater than of male image. So there is this gender problem when it comes to AI, and a lot of unfairness.
Responsible AI really matters to me because at the core of what we do as creatives in a working setting, right? Like creativity, as I mentioned before, is just a human characteristic. I think we're all creative. We make and manifest things in this world. It's how culture comes about. It's how all entertainment comes about. And we saved everybody during COVID. It's just, you're welcome. Everybody was real excited about all the creative shit that was coming out when you were locked down in your house. But I say that to say, like, the ethical concerns here are that, like, our sovereignty as artists and our ability to and continue to produce creative things comes from our intellectual property rights, right? Our ability to protect our assets and make sure that people have to pay for them in order to make money. In a business setting, if we're not protecting our ability to license and authorize people to use or not use our work, we're losing our ability to effectively be a part of the marketplace in the world.
What artists needs to be very, very cognizant of is how people experience their art and the context of their art. So, for example, again, at the Serpentine, when this exhibition was made, for them to go out and market it, to then, open it up for free to children without having a huge amount of context and teaching and people who were there explaining at their level what was going on, that was, I think, a huge mistake. That I thought that the exhibition was wonderful, but the way that they explained what was going on was so sophisticated that really almost only people who already knew about AI and what was going on were going to understand, that context they were giving. So I think artists should explore AI. They should push the boundaries because that's what art's about. And I don't think we have to draw lines in art. What we have to do is draw lines in marketing and presentation and context. We have to be very mindful of that and responsible.
Artists need to be aware of the limitations and opportunities that come with AI. Ultimately, we need to understand that these are tools. There is no difference between an AI image generator and Photoshop or a paintbrush. It's a tool. Now, it does come with its own unique features. It draws on enormous amounts of energy and it requires enormous amounts of data that very often infringe on people's copyright. But I don't think we need to outright stop the use of AI. I think that is naive. The instance in which an AI tool is trained on data that are open source, that are brought in voluntarily by artists, and where the artists are compensated, for me results in a tool that is respectful towards the rights of artists. And it sounds like a wonderful initiative.
I love the idea of ideating with these tools. Like, I feel like image generation tools and even large language learning models help me literally eviscerate creative block. If I have a loose idea of what I'm trying to get towards, I, as a creative, always, and an entrepreneur, and I don't know what part of my brain separates it similar, but I'm sure there's creators in there. But if I see something, improve upon it in my head much easier than I can create something from scratch, right? So like sometimes like I don't know exactly what I want to do here, but I want to make a sword, right? And I know I need a sword for this thing. Well, let me just type in like fantasy sword with blah blah blah, and just like some stuff, right? Like I don't know, just and then see what the machine says. And it never creates something I want to use exactly as is, because I'm an artist and I have artistic integrity, but it allows me to get inspiration. There's a magical muse inside of there for me, which I think is pretty cool. It comes from the amalgamation of the creativity of humanity.
I think it's important to remember that creativity is something that we value when we look at art. We value the experience of the artist, we value the historical background of the artist, which is to some extent embedded in their creations. This is lost when we use an AI tool that scours through enormous data sets and that generates pixels that roughly capture the features present in the prompts that people put into them. Whether people like it or not, we've had AI generated art winning prizes already. So yeah, someone will like it. I might not, but someone else might.
The consolidation of power in the hands of a select few individuals, and in some cases syndicates, is dangerous. And I think these companies need to be regulated, and there needs to be democratic oversight over the use of such powerful technologies like AI. And I also think it's really important that there's an interdisciplinary collaboration between different stakeholders, because technologists, engineers, software developers will have their own bias towards a particular outcome, whereas social scientists, policymakers, historians, philosophers will have a different perspective on things, and they'll be able to enhance the use of artificial intelligence and ensure that there's the interposition of human decency and human values.
Many people thought that the reasons behind creating large language models and gathering data from all of us were mostly altruistic for our benefits and so on. Now we know that there are some commercialized version of ChatGPT, for example, and also we know that part of the information was used by OpenAI to feed ChatGPT were violating intellectual rights. So the concern is that if you want to, why responsible AI matters and why should we be transparent is quite clear. Human beings are imperfect in many ways, and history has shown that many times. Even in 21st century, things that happened in recent history, like within the last couple of years, wars that nobody has expected to happen, did happen. And they were of huge shock to many of us. At least they were to me. Like, I live in Poland, I'm Polish, and the war in Ukraine had huge impact on me. And I just, it was so surreal that it was difficult to comprehend that. So, as David Hume said, there is this problem of induction and how we perceive future, that we very often assume that tomorrow will look quite similarly to what we have today. that tomorrow's AIs will be as benevolent and beneficial to us as they are today.
Overall, I think that AI it's a litmus test of how we're going to move forward comprehensively. You know, that the way that we're looking at AI and the way it's being used, and when you look at wider political trends and wider global trends, that it's a real way that if the community comes together around AI and starts to look at what's working, what's regenerative, like I think, like I mentioned, the scientific community, where they have like peer review and they have lots of testing before things go out to market, there's regulation, that if we can start to look at how the risk versus return is being managed, you know, with frameworks and regulations versus, you know, break now, apologize later, go out, you know, just the much more short-term thinking, that if we can use AI as a way to really outline best practices, it can be used much more widely to say, you know, this is, you know, sustainable business. But I think one of the biggest North Stars through the whole process is why. Why are you choosing your data the way you're choosing it? Why, you know, why are you building this model? Why, what's the, you know, why are you doing it? What's the hoped for outcome? And then looking at it from a society level instead of maybe even as micro as a business level, you know, and also looking for, instead of short term, you know, quarterly returns and, you know, investor returns, looking at it from, you know, 10, 15, 50-year scale.
We know that AI is nothing other than just statistical programs based on mathematics. Those are mathematical models based on predictions. So we should be aware of it rather than being fearful and building up building extra stories around the myths that are circulating, that AI will conquer the world, that we will soon disappear and will fall into extinction because of AI. I don't agree with that vision. I'm more optimistic, and I believe that humanity can deal with it. Obviously, there are risks. Once again, I want to highlight that, especially when politics and politicians get involved, and there are some groups of interest which want to manipulate and take over those powerful tools. That's the danger, not the tool. The tool is as a tool. We had tools since the very beginning of our existence. Early human beings were inventing different kind of tools, and nobody, obviously at the beginning we were killing each other with knives, but later on we are also using it for other purposes. And there is always this danger that knife, as Aristotle was saying, can be used for the purpose of cutting, but it can also be used for other purposes of carving beautiful sculptures or of doing other things. So every tool can be transformed into something useful and helpful, or something that is dangerous.
I want to create a future with AI that empowers small creators, and by small I mean not multi-million-dollar publicly traded businesses that like own the entertainment industry. I want a space where writers, authors, storytellers together in small teams and make grand projects that no one could have ever done before without these tools. I want me and my friends to be able to go, hey, we've got this idea, and we can build a Laura model of a character that we sketched out in, you know, 5 different poses and all the different perspective, and then use another software to layer out scenes and shots, and then have the AI do the bulk of the work so that we can do polish and editing and get it 80% of the way there. And then all of a sudden do short stories, maybe entire animated series that we could never hope to do with less than 100 people, but now we can do it with 5. Right? But I want us to have that ability and that power and that sovereignty to use these tools in a way that allows us to empower ourselves and do more, tell more stories, be more creative, put our message out there in a greater way than we ever could before. However, we need to be able to protect ourselves from the larger interests that want to fire off everybody, steal everybody's work, and do whatever they want without any oversight, right? So we need to find that balance. One of the solutions I see as being very viable to creating these ethical data sets is making sure that there's a community push and a movement for people to demand these things, that they want generative AI, but they want it done right. That said, there are companies that are coming together that are not on the market yet, but they will be here, that are making intentionally ethically created data sets with creators that are compensated, that have been given credit and consent for their work to be in there, and then are thus being paid as these data sets are being licensed. And that's the ethical solution.